Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Freelance Success Framework podcast series. Hey, Kate.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So full transparency, frankly, if you are watching the video as opposed to listening to the podcast, you will notice that consistency-wise, we're wearing the same clothing in all of the other ones. Now, don't worry, we do have plenty of items of clothing, but we recorded all the other episodes, and then we thought, you know what? There's one lingering question that we want to make sure, we really wanted to make sure that we answered. And I think, frankly, too, it's one that I kind of forget about because we've been freelancing for so long and we work with so many freelancers. I've been freelancing for 20 years, full-time and part-time. Kate, you've been freelancing for 10 at least. And again, we work with thousands of students who are freelancers. But yeah, so the question that we still get asked every once in a while is freelancing a valid career? So this would be a real short one. The answer is yes.
Real insulting if it wasn't. I feel like I take insult to people that say my career is not real.
Yes.
But that's often comes from people who don't know what freelancing is, or we were talking just before this that freelancing used to be used as a euphemism for not a real career. You're just kind of between jobs and I'm freelancing in my spare time. And frankly, I feel like people still use that as a way to describe freelancing, or that's how they think of it.
Yeah, it's I think it's very funny to me when people are like, "Oh, is freelancing really a real job?" And I know that some of that comes from it sounds like it's too good to be true. Like, oh wow, I can not work on staff for a company. I can choose my schedule, choose what I do, choose my clients, choose how much I make, all that kind of stuff. It feels I get that. It sounds like it's too good to be true. But the fact is that it's a very viable career. I think it's funny to me that the idea that, well, if you are on staff for a company, that's a real job. But if you are doing the same work for a company and they're giving you a check, it's just not a paycheck. You're not an employee, you are a freelancer, that somehow one is valid and the other one isn't valid. That doesn't make any sense to me. We talked about throughout the series that you will likely make more money than you should be making more money than you would be if you were on staff. And there are multiple reasons for that. We have a whole episode for that. And the fact that freelancers are very much in demand. We have a whole episode for that as well. So I think the fact that the only real distinction is whether you are technically employed by a company or whether they pay you in a different way. They have, I don't know what, an automated paycheck that goes out to you versus they manually cut you a check. That's it doesn't make any sense, and I think freelancing isn't a real job. It's such an antiquated way of thinking. And I think that especially over the next couple of years, as we see even more people go freelance and companies embrace it even more than they already do, I think that antiquated way of thinking is really going to fall by the wayside. I think you're probably going to hear that a lot more from I was going to say older generations, but that's not even necessarily fair. But just from people who are used to the way, it used to be the careers evolve, right? It used to be you got a job after college and you stayed there for 40 years and then you retired. And now we look back at that and we think, well, that's crazy. You get a job and every 3 years or so, you either move up or move out. And even that, eventually it's going to be and crazy is not the right word. That's not a great word to use, but just a little, it's just different thinking, right? And eventually it's going to be, well, I could go on staff at a company if I really like it and that's the direction I want to go, or I could freelance, or I could go back and forth throughout my career and embrace that flexibility. And I think that that's something to be celebrated versus trying to cut it down and say, oh, that's not a real career. When again, the only difference is that with freelancing, you have more freedom.
Well, and the times, as you said, the times change. Things evolve. The 5-day work week didn't used to be a thing, and now places are talking about a 4-day work week. And so things are going to continue to change and shift and evolve. And I think a lot of folks who, at least in my experience, who don't necessarily understand that freelance and that I have a whole full time, that I work full time hours, um, not with one client, but with several different clients. It comes from this traditional mindset of, to your point, you go, you get a job, you stay at that job. But even just things like you work 9 to 5, and that's a typical work day. I think even that we're starting to see that shift. Work from home, work remote. That's become a lot bigger post pandemic. Obviously, so many companies had to go remote. And so that shifting and thinking has really accelerated even faster than I think it already was pre-pandemic. But so many people I have spoken with, especially my husband was for a very long time in a very traditional public sector job, government work. And everyone that we encountered was blown away when it was like, oh, wait, your wife is the breadwinner, which, we don't use those terms. It was still shocking for them. That was the only way for them to understand, oh, your wife makes more than you do. Oh, that's a real career then. Oh, wow. Okay. And I think before we would try to explain what I did to a lot of people because they asked like, oh, your wife has a meeting or a job, and they couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that I was working from a foreign country, but B, that I could be doing well at something that's freelancing, that it wasn't just a hobby, that it wasn't just what I did in my spare time. And we have a whole episode on the fact that you can do it part-time. It can be a side hustle, 100%, but it can also be a full-time job. I work full-time hours. Some weeks I don't, but in the course of a year, my salary is much better than it would be on staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and sometimes when people say, my Uncle Jim is teasing me because freelancing isn't a real job, or my mother-in-law is this and this and this, and they always say, well, what do I say? I said, well, you know what? The most fun way to answer back is, well, whether or not you think it's a real job, I'm fully booked up with clients, so take that for what it is, or make of that what you will. But I'm fully booked up with clients, and I'm making way more than I ever did on staff. I think it's not a matter of revenge, and it's not even like you need to prove it to anybody. It's your career. It's your life.
Quite frankly, if it helps, I think the way to reframe it, it takes a little bit, but to say, I run my own graphic design business, or I run my own copywriting business, or I run my own web development business or social media management business, whatever your thing is, to reframe it as you are running your own business. You don't have to use the word freelancing if you don't want to. And if it's easier for you to explain it to people and not have to deal with the headache of the questions or the comments over Thanksgiving or whatever dinner you're celebrating, you don't have to. You are running your own business. So
yeah, that's a great point. It's a one-person business, which is just as legitimate as a 2-person business or a 3-person business. It's all about the way people frame it. But
and frankly,
your success
many 10-person businesses may have started with 1 person. So maybe yours is going to grow to that. It has to start somewhere. And you got to start with 1, and that's fine.
Like we said, this was going to be a short episode, but we did still want to just make sure to mention this, because there is that. I think there are a lot of people out there who are like, "Oh yeah, freelancing. As soon as I understand how to do it, I'm all in for it." Absolutely. And like we keep saying, there are steps you take. You learn a system for finding and landing clients. There's nothing magical about it. But there are still people who are learning to embrace the concept of freelancing, and maybe that's you, or maybe it is people around you or people who love you. And the advice that I always kind of remind people is just if people are speaking their opinions, you could say, great, thank you for that, but you don't necessarily have to listen to them. Just because their perspective is a little bit different doesn't mean that you have to give sway to their opinions, especially if maybe their opinions about freelancing are not actually based on any data from real life, just kind of based on their impressions of freelancing from who knows when. Yes, exactly. So it's with any changes we make in our lives. The people around us want us to be often, mostly, hopefully, want us to be happy and want us to be safe. But if they're questioning whether or not freelancing is a real career, on this one, I'm going to have to gently and lovingly say, this is not their wheelhouse. And we can tell you, and with 30 years of experience between us and our thousands of students, that freelancing, it is a real career, and it's going to be a delightful opportunity to prove to them when you see them at Thanksgiving or whatever. And they say, oh, freelancing, huh? How's that going? And I say, well, no, my schedule is fully booked with clients and I'm making more than I ever have. So pass the cranberry sauce, Uncle Jim.
Well, not every startup starts with, actually the majority of businesses do not start with venture capital, millions of dollars where they can hire a full team right off the bat. The majority of businesses don't start that way.
Yeah, exactly. So is freelancing a real career? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. If you want to, send them over to this episode if you think it will help. But also you don't have to prove yourself to anybody. Exactly. You don't have to justify it. Just do the work. Grow your business, and that'll be any possible justification they could possibly need. And if they still need justification, who needs them? Okay, so there you have it. We talk a lot more about other topics in depth in the rest of this series, but like we said, we did just want to make sure that we got this out there if this is kind of in the back of your mind. But then, of course, we will catch you in the next episode. Bye, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on this special Freelance Success Framework video series. If you found us through our free on-demand video training, then you already know 3 of the biggest secrets for building a dependable and scalable freelance business, and you are well on your way to success. If you haven't seen our free video training yet, be sure to check it out at freelancesuccesstraining.com. We'll see you there.